Okay, so our first book, this is my first episode. We're going to read uh, um, Investigations of a Dog by Franz Kafka. The first chapter is called In the City. One winter's afternoon, during a blizzard, Oscar M., an aging student, if you looked at him from close up, you saw that he had terrifying eyes. Oscar M., in winter clothes and winter coat, scarf around his neck, and a fur hat on his head, came to a sudden stop in the empty square. Whatever he was thinking was causing his eye to blink rapidly. He was sunk so deep in thought that at one point he took off his hat and rubbed its coarse fur against his face. Finally, he seemed to come to a conclusion, spun on his heel like a dancer, and headed home. When he opened the door of his parents' apartment, he saw his father, a fleshy faced, clean shaven man, sitting at an empty table facing the door. Not before time, he said. No sooner had Oscar set foot in the room. And not a step closer, please. I am so furious with you that I can't answer for the consequences. But father, said Oscar, and only then did he notice that he was all out of breath. Quiet, yelled his father, and stood up, obscuring a window. Quiet, I say, and but me no buts, all right? So saying, he picked up the table in two hands and carried it one pace nearer to Oscar. I can't put up with your dissolute life. It would okay. I can't put up with your dissolute life a moment longer. I am an old man. I have to have in you a support for my later years. But if you turn out to be worse than my illnesses, I'm disgusted by such a son who, by sheer laziness, prodigal, prodigality, oh shit, whatever, wickedness and stupidity, is driving his old father to an early grave. At this point, the old man fell silent, though his face continued to work as though he was still speaking. Dear Papa, said Oscar, and cautiously approached the table. Calm yourself. Everything will be all right. I have just had an idea that will make me the productive human being of your dreams. What's that then? Asked his father, staring fixedly into a corner. Trust me, I'll explain it to you over supper. Really, I was always a good son. Only the fact that I wasn't able to embittered me that. Prove it to you so embittered me that. Seeing that I was so unable to delight you, I chose to annoy you instead. But now just let me take a turn in the fresh air to help me develop my thoughts. His father, who had initially been leaning against the table in growing attentiveness, stood up. I don't believe what you've just said is worth much. It's just talk. But in the end, you are my son. Come back soon, we'll eat together, and you can tell me what's on your mind. That small indication of your confidence is enough for me. I thank you for it sincerely. But isn't it apparent from my expression that I'm completely taken up by this with this serious plan? I don't know about that, said his father. Perhaps it's my fault. I've rather got out of this habit of looking at you at all. And so saying, it was a habit of his. He tapped on the table to indicate the passing of time. The principal thing is that I have no confidence left in you, Oscar. If I yelled at you with when you came in, didn't I? Then it wasn't in any hope that it might improve you. I only did it thinking of you, your poor mama, who, while she may not yet feel any pain over you, is already being weakened by her efforts to ward off such a pain. She thinks this is somehow in your interests, but in the end, these are all things that you know very well, and I would have saved myself the trouble of mentioning them to you again, had you not provoked me with your promises. In the midst of these latest words, the maid entered the room to the room to see to the stove. No sooner had she left again than Oscar exclaimed, "Papa, I would never have looked to you for such forbearance. If I had just a small idea, let's say something towards my dissertation, which has been languishing in my bookcase these past 10 years and is desperately in need of fresh ideas, then it's just about possible. I've hardly likely that I would have come running home from my walk as happened today, and father and said, "Father, I've had an idea." And if you had thereupon, with your respected voice, repeated your reapproaches of a moment ago, then my idea would have been simply blown away, and I should have no option but to march off with or without a word of apology. Whereas now, everything you say in objection to me helps my ideas. They don't stop coming. They multiply and grow in my head. I will go now because I need to be alone to put them in some order. He gulped for breath in the warm room. Of course, it could be some villainy you've got in your head, he said, his father with big round eyes. Then I believe it would be, indeed, get you in its grip. If it's any kind of decent thought, though, it'll disappear overnight. I know you. Oscar twisted his head as though someone had him by the throat. That's enough! You're picking away at me for no reason. The mere possibility that you might be able to predict the outcome accurately shouldn't tempt you to disturb me in my good thoughts. Perhaps my past recordings gives you the right to do something, but it's still wrong for you. That only goes to show how great your uncertainty must be if you are to trust me. Nothing compels me, said Oscar, and his head gave a twitch. He went right up to Susan, so that it was no longer possible to tell him who it was. What I said with respect, begin even with no candor, as you will see in due course, because my regard for you and mother plays a leading role in my idea. In that case, I'd probably better thank you now, said his father. Being that it's most unlikely that your mother and I will still be among the living when the proper time for thanks comes around. Please, Father, let the future rest as it deserves. If you wake it ahead of time, you only rest the result. The only result is a sleepy-headed present. You shouldn't need yourself to remind you of that. Also, I wasn't about to try and persuade you of anything. I was just announcing my idea, and that at least, as even you will have to admit, I succeeded in doing. Now, Oscar, one thing still perplexes me. How is it that you've not come to me more often with such things? It accords so much with your nature. No, I'm serious. Well, if only you'd given me a good beating instead of listening to me. I came running here, God knows, to give you a pleasant surprise, but as long as my pleasant it, as long as my plan isn't thought wholly thought through, I can't tell you what it is. So why punish me for my good intentions and demand explanations of me that will only impede me the execution of my plan? That's enough now. I'm not interested anyway. But I had better tell you because I can see you retreating to the door, obviously in some tearing rush to get somewhere by your little device you had managed to ally the worst of my rage, with the result that I merely feel sadder than I did before. So I would like to beg you, if you like, I'll even fold my hands like this, at least not to breathe a word about your ideas to your mother. Be satisfied with me. This is not my father who's speaking to me in this way, cried Oscar, his hand already on the doorknob. Either something happened to you since midday, or you're a stranger. Someone I've never met before in my father's stead. My true father. For an instant, Oscar stopped out, open mouthed, would have thrown his arms around me. He would have summoned my mother to come. What's the matter with you, father? I suggest you go and eat with your true father then. It promise me it promises to be much more agreeable. He will come. Give him time. He can't fail. And mother will be there too. And friends whom I'm going to fetch now. And friends who I'm going to fetch now, everyone. And with that Oscar barged into the door, as enough to force it open. though it swung effortlessly. Once he'd arrived at friend's lodgings, he bent down to the little landlady with the words, "It's all right, the engineer is asleep now, I know." And without paying any attention to the woman, who, unhappy in view of the late visit, continued to pace uselessly back and forth in the corridor, he opened the glass door with shutter. Okay, I gotta go already.